founders of, for example, critical race theory, is that essentially disparities equal discrimination. That if you see any disparity between one group in the United States and another group in the United States, that is the result of some exterior discrimination. It is not the result of individuals within that group acting differently. It's not the result of cultural differences. It's not the result of aggregated differences within individuals within that group. And that, to me, is a failure of logic. It also is destructive in that it separates group from group, particularly in the United States, on the basis of race, which is not the best way of actually bringing Americans together or forming policy that is the best for all Americans.
Do you think there's room for nuance, perhaps, though? Like, yeah, maybe not everybody, but there certainly has been a large sect of people that has had it harder because of the color of their skin or their sexuality or their gender identity. Could you acknowledge that maybe there's, you know, a middle ground there where it's not all, but there is some people who certainly have had a disadvantage?
I will say that history has consequences, obviously, and that if you are talking about historic marginalization of particular groups, that has consequences. The problem is that when you design policy in order to rectify for cosmic injustices or historic injustices, you have to try and measure out whether underperformance, say, economically, is due to those historic injustices. If so, how much? What is the corrective policy that is actually aimed at achieving best opportunity for all? The diversity, equity, inclusion policies that are directed at separating race from race and then benefiting one race, for example, at the expense of another, ignore the fact that there are individuals within those groups, that history does not fall on everybody equivalent, that frankly, genetics and intelligence don't necessarily fall on an individual level, right? You and I look the same, we might have different heights, we might have different qualities. That is just the way that you know, God or nature has bestowed skill sets on everybody. What exactly is the government supposed to correct for? And if you took this entire group and you separated it in half, just draw a line anywhere, it's a circle, right? Anywhere you draw a line, you're going to get disparities between the two groups on either side of the line without regard to race, without regard to sex, and without regard to, for example, sexual orientation.
But does that mean that that hasn't played an effect in that story at all?
I'm not going to, no, you'd be a fool to claim that, again, past injustices have no effect on what's happened today. Thanks so much. Watching guys gear up to run is really entertaining.
That better be good.
That was so nice, everybody. Thank you.
So you believe that certain economic disparities between racial groups are caused as a result of economic... cultural differences?
Sure.
The reckoning.
And so what is the backing on this? What would you say contributes to your belief in that?
Okay, so not all cultures, for example, value studying in school the same. You can check this by the amount of hours that kids of particular cultures study. So, for example, Korean Americans study a lot more than, for example, Latino Americans in terms of the number of hours that kids study. It would be hard to suggest what to attribute that to other than sort of parental guidance and what exactly the priorities are of the parents. This is true, by the way, between white people. Okay, so when I talk about disparities between groups, you can talk about white Appalachia, and there are very different values with regard to studying than there are for, say, upper-class white Americans who are living in Brooklyn, right? That's not the exact same thing. So cultural differences are not just racial differences. I think that anybody who attempts to sort of clumsily map that on and pretend that that's all the same, that's obviously not true. But cultural differences do explain an enormous amount of group disparities across incomes. To take a perfect example, you know, if you look at single motherhood rates, they're not equivalent across groups. So they're going to have massive differences with regard to outcomes for children. So if you're talking about cultural differences, again, cultural is just a way, it was a rough way of saying how people act within a group on a large scale. And that is going to amount to some generalization, but that generalization is going to tend to, shall we say, concur. It's going to correlate very highly with the outcome.
But culture is acclimated over time. It becomes a thing over time. And so do you not think that the
victory lies ahead?
Disadvantages that certain ethnic groups have been through over time has created this culture in which they're unable to put themselves ahead? You do say that Asian Americans are more likely to study, yes, but we have to take into account that after the Chinese Exclusion Act, Asian Americans were given a certain type of reparations which allowed them into the country. And in order for them, they were given visas, which allowed them to come into the, yes, they were given easier processes into visas, yes, which allowed them into, no, it's a form of reparations, which they were once excluded from coming in. And so giving them an easier opportunity to attain these visas allowed them into the U.S. And mainly the individuals who were able to attain those were people with higher educations, which is why it may seem that Asian Americans within the country who come in typically with higher incomes as well as higher educational backgrounds, it may come off as that they are more studious than Latino Americans. But what we have to take into account is that Latin America and Hispanic people have faced a lot of tremendous setback due to historical atrocities. It's not their culture per se. What you see within...
Is there any individual agency in here, or is it all historic circumstance?
Everything is based off of history. Everything acclimates. Everything is an accumulation of history.
So to take the single motherhood example, for example...
The way...
So that was my neighbor. Whoa. Hey, how's it going? How are you? Good to meet you.
So your basis is saying that culturally, people don't have the same advantages, right?
I'm saying that not every culture sort of initiates the same action within groups.
So, in part, you're saying that you're part of each culture. You know what goes on in each culture to say these things.
No, I'm saying that I can analyze the activities of a particular group with reference to actual behavior.
So, if you go into my culture, we're told that we can achieve anything through hard work. We have to work 10 times harder. But you're not part of our culture, so you're explaining something that doesn't have to do with you. But in turn, you're saying that that culture, unfortunately, does not value the same thing that the next culture does.
So revealed preference tends to be a better way of doing social science than subjective perception. So revealed preference is how people act in the world. So for example, if you have people who say, we really, really value our kids studying, and then their kids don't study at all, that would be a revealed preference.
Okay.
Everybody has
so then when you have people
who
say, in corporate America, you have people who value nepotism versus actual studying hard. What is that called then?
Okay, so the idea that people generally value nepotism over studying hard, I'd like to see the evidence of that, given the fact the vast majority of wealth in this country is not created through nepotism or through inherited wealth.
But Donald Trump was given nepotism, was he not?
I mean, he's one example among a bajillion people who are very, very wealthy in this country. I'm very wealthy now. I certainly wasn't born very wealthy.
But then you can't speak on Donald Trump's experience, can you not?
That just happens to be the case. Okay, I mean, you can laugh at my particular history, but I grew up in an 1,100 square foot home in Burbank, California, with 4 siblings in 1 bedroom.
In Burbank, hold on. In Burbank, I'm sorry, but in Burbank versus growing up in South Central, being told that you have to excel 10 times harder than the next person, but then you're not part of the culture, to say that you can actually come to these disparities is kind of far-sighted.
The idea that you have to work 10 times harder coming from South Central based on, for example, test scores is obviously not true. We've had affirmative action programs in this country for solidly 40 years.
But now affirmative action is gone. It's out the door. Now DEI is present. DEI is actually saying that we need to have diversity, equity, inclusion. So you're actually putting a footing in the door for different races, different genders, different women, different men, everything. So now you're saying that because this program is gone, this one isn't.
Sorry, you've been voted out by the majority. Please return to your seats.
Oh, yeah, like a jackrabbit. Thank you, guys. I appreciate that.
Hi,
nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, too. So, I kind of want to shift the conversation about DEI a little bit away from culture, because I don't know if that's necessarily like a helpful conversation to have. And I really want to talk more about representation. So, 1 in 5 Americans currently is Hispanic. This country, like it or not, is not a homogenous country. We are a very diverse country. Mm-hmm. Do you not think that our legislators should be representative of the overall population?
I don't see a way that you can have a quote-unquote representative legislature with 435 members of Congress in a country of 340 million people, because you can divvy that up however you want. It's not by race, you can do it by sex, you can do it by gender, you can do it by sexual orientation. How exactly do you decide what is quote-unquote the representative group? And also, I don't believe that individuals ought to be represented based on group identity. So, for example, I'm Jewish. Jews are actually overrepresented in Congress. I don't think that we ought to decide exactly how many people in Congress are Jewish based on the Jewish population of the country. I think that's actually a pretty silly way to do representation.
Well, we don't have to do it systematically, but fundamentally there is an issue with the fact that we are not fully represented. Like, the entire population is not represented. We have never had a black female president. I still have to pay taxes.
We've never had
the whole concept is no taxation without. We have had a white male president. We've had like.
Whether Jews count as white or not has been sort of an object of debate for quite a while. We do. Okay.
You do.
So, I mean, it depends according to whom, and that's a pretty recent development. Okay, so.
Basically everyone. It's a religion.
Judaism.
Do you not agree that you were a white man?
I mean, I think that it depends on the context in which we're discussing it.
So what are you, Ben? Are you not a white guy?
I mean, I'm a man of Jewish ethnicity, which is sometimes grouped with white and sometimes not. I mean, that's the more accurate way to put it. But when we're talking about
with
Jews, which is an ethnicity. I mean,
so you're not white at all.
I mean, again, it depends who's doing the grouping and how. I've seen Jews grouped with white and Jews grouped with not white. Are we just pretending that doesn't exist? That's a reality. However, as far as your generalized point, which is that we are supposed to identify people by group identity, that we don't have a black female president, somehow black females have not been represented. So Barack Obama was in no way representative of black females because he's not a female.
No, he was representative,
so
but
he was
that's
half
the point.
representative. How do you do the math on this? And why?
You shouldn't do the math on it completely statistically, but the fact
You shouldn't
is,
do the math on it at all.
clearly
You should treat people as individuals.
underrepresented.
You should treat people as individuals.
Well, if you don't even want Kamala Harris to attempt to create DEI initiatives in office, then there isn't even going to be a conversation about it.
I mean, I don't think there ought to be a conversation about why we ought to be represented by race or by sex. I think that we are each individual people with individual ideas, and if that person represents my ideas, I don't care what sex, race, or sexual orientation they are.
I mean, to an extent, yes,
No,
but there
entirely.
is an issue with the lack of empathy in office. We need to be able to empathize and legislate for the people that are living in this country.
I was not
Do you
aware.
not believe that?
I was not aware that empathy is relegated to particular race solidarity.
No, but I mean, it's easier to be empathetic towards people whose experiences you can fundamentally understand based on your identity. Like, do you not believe that people have an inherent bias?
So first of all, I'm
based
not
on
sure.
identity?
I mean, we can start with empathy itself. I'm not sure that empathy is always the best basis for actual public policy, because when you have group solidarity and empathy based on group solidarity, you're going to attempt to actually benefit the group with whom you have solidarity. So that actually cuts against
But
generalized
that's like a
public
fundamental
policy.
thing that just exists, which is why we need representation in government. Okay, cute. Thank you.
Wow, he got it this time. All right, nice. Good to see you. How are you doing?
Doing all right. How are you, Ben?
You know, it's been a day.
Yeah, it's a little bit of like an interesting setting being surrounded by 20 people that disagree with you.
I mean, the truth is, I grew up in LA and then I went to law school in Cambridge, so,
So
I'm
you're
a
a lot
little
more
used to it.
than
It's
20.
yeah. I've been here before.
Anyways, let's talk about DEI. Do you think that Trump should have won 2016? I'll wrap it in. It's conceptually relevant. I'll demonstrate the relevance.
Okay, sounds good. By what measure? Do I think he did win, or do I think he should have won?
Do you think he should have won?
I mean, yes, I'm happy that he won. If the question is, am I happy that he won? I'm happy that he won.
Okay. Well, I'd say that Trump won 2016 because.
By the way, I did not vote for either candidate in 2016. That's a decision made in retrospect.
Awesome. So I think that Trump won 2016 because of a modality of DEI. Essentially, what I'd say is the Electoral College, right, strives for inclusion of smaller states with lower populations by overrepresenting them in the overall vote. Like, you could correct me if I'm wrong, or the Sand fact checkers can. I'm pretty sure that over the last 25 to 30 years, Republicans have won the presidency given the Electoral College, not given the overall popular vote. So if you're against DEI, if you don't want inclusion on the basis of race, inclusion on the basis of gender, or even what you were saying earlier, we could even say inclusion on the basis of class, why do you want inclusion on the basis of population, rural areas, states, etc.?
We should actually use a better example. Why don't you just ask if I believe in the U.S. Senate? Right,
the U.S. Senate, this would also apply to the U.S. Senate.
Right, okay, so let's use the U.S. Senate, because the U.S. Senate is actually even more unrepresentative of the general population than the Electoral College, which is at least a rough approximation.
It'd just be funnier to hear you say that you shouldn't have voted for Trump in 2016, but we could talk about the Senate as well.
That's a different subject, but I'm very happy that he won, even though I didn't vote for him. I mean, we can talk about Trump later.
Yeah.
We've already done a bit. I'm sure we'll do more. As far as the idea that every elected body has to be elected based on population as opposed to based on the area of geographic distribution or the states that actually pre-existed the federal government. Okay, the way that the Constitution of the United States was created was as a contract between sovereign states, which is one of the reasons why, for example, you have a United States Senate as opposed to just a House of Representatives. So is that a form of DEI? That seems like a stretch to me. The kind of DEI that I'm talking about specifically would be separating human beings based on inherent characteristics, like, for example, race, as opposed to suggesting that the United States Senate, which is obviously unrepresentative of the general population,
well, seemingly my point is
somehow bad. That's a check and balance, right?
Well, seemingly my point is that this is another modality of DEI. I've like no problem with you explaining to me, right, why the Senate or the Electoral College would be given the U.S. Constitution and like some contractual agreement that they had between the sovereign states. That's fine. But what I'd say is that your claim here would just imply that the Constitution upholds DEI within our electoral processes.
If your claim is
so, do you think that the Constitution upholds DEI in the sense of including smaller states with less representative populations?
That is a true stretch of the meaning of DEI. But I get your point. I mean, if the idea is that the only thing that is not pure DEI in a democratic context would be sort of popularly represented votes, then I think you can make the case that basically you should get rid of every representative institution. We should go to a pure democracy because.
Well, I'm not making a case for what we should replace it with. I'm making the case that it would uphold DEI. We could talk about what other systems should function in the case of the Electoral College or in the case of the Senate, but that's a completely different conversation than are these systems upholding DEI.
So again, I think that you're definitionally stretching DEI. If DEI is the basic idea that all disparities equal discrimination and must be rectified by government interventionism, which is sort of the definition, and stretching that to mean the Electoral College seems like you're going pretty far afield to defend a very broad concept as specifically badly applied.
Wait, 1 second. I don't think that we need to say that DEI is equivalent to disparities equal discrimination. We could just see that DEI is like a qualm for disparities in general, right? And what we apply here in this certain modality when we're talking about the Electoral College, when we're talking about the Senate, is we're trying to qualm the disparities of the lack of population in rural areas. We're trying to qualm the disparities of smaller states compared to larger states. And seemingly, you haven't really given me a response to this apart from calling it a stretch, but I do appreciate you bringing it.
No, I mean, it seems to me like the argument that you're making is that in order for there to be calm and sort of conciliation inside the United States, particular racial groups have to be given particular benefits. Okay, because that was the argument with regard to the states in the United States, right? When the Constitution was formed, the way that you came to an actual agreement in the Constitutional Convention is states were not going to sign on unless they got particular guarantees of the interests of those particular states, right? So if you're claiming that that's DEI, then the response that I would have is right, because that's how you have to come to an agreement. So if you're going to make the parallel argument with regard to DEI in, for example, the racial context, you then have to make the case that the only way that you can have conciliation in the United States is for particular racial groups to be given specific racial benefits, and otherwise the country is going to split apart, which is an argument with which I generally disagree, even if I agreed with the way the Constitution was formed.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't see like your parallel here, right? I think that DEI could exist in multiple modalities. My argument in a nutshell is nothing more than the fact that we see disparities existing in rural areas compared to metropolitan areas. We see disparities existing in the size of the state and its overall population. And you're qualming these,
right? But the
losing
the DEI response to that would not be
like through like an over-representation.
And the DEI.
And I understand that your argument is, but all my single-handed point here is that you would say, in some sense, that this is a reconciliation to introduce more, inclusion in the sense of a state to state in their population. I mean, so if you make the concession that this is DEI, would you say in the same sense that we shouldn't have
I don't make the concession that falls within the definition of DEI that I've used, and if your claim is that I'm now in favor of, for example, subsidies to rural areas at the expense of urban areas, I'm not actually.
So do you think that DEI would only apply in the context of race?
No, it could apply in the context of class. It could apply.
Okay, if it can apply in the context of race, class, and identity, why can't it apply in the context of a state's population and their representation in our government?
I mean, if they were to receive special bennies at the expense of other members of the population,
they are. Yes, like Alabama or Arkansas are literally receiving special benefits insofar as a greater level of representation in our Senate and in our electoral processes compared to people in California. I mean, for instance, that's my buddy Parker over there. He lives in California. Right, and I'm
fully aware
I
of the
live in
Electoral College and
Colorado.
Senate work, dude.
So I literally have more representation, person for person, in the sense of Parker's vote compared to my vote, because individualistically speaking, I'm from a state that has more representation, and the same thing can be said for multiple other states across America, especially in the Senate. There's two senators that represent me and everyone else in Colorado, and there's two senators that represent him and millions more people.
How are you getting from point A, which is that California has 2 senators and Colorado has 2 senators, to point B, which is that we should have incredible racial carve-outs on the basis of group identity at the behest of the federal government? That is a very, very large stretch. And to get from point A to point B on the basis of the constitutional structure seems like you're going pretty far afield. I appreciate what you're trying to do, but, you know, the rubber band only goes so far.
That's the end of this claim.
That's great.
I appreciate it, man. Hopefully we can talk more.
I agree. My next claim is that Kamala Harris's extreme pro-abortion stance is morally indefensible. What's going on, dude? Hey, good to meet you. Okay, so I just want to clarify the claim because okay, so the claim that I'm making about Kamala Harris, let's first say like what I believe her position to be. Okay, so she has not stated any abortion law that she would not veto. right? So the Partial Birth Abortion Ban Act, for example, or late-term abortion bans, she would presumably veto that as President of the United States. That's the position that I'm taking in this particular prompt. Okay, so that is the position that I find morally indefensible. Okay, so again, I'm a very, very pro-life person, but I can see at least the sort of nuanced arguments that some people on the left try to make about abortion, even if I disagree with those arguments. The argument that she's making, which is effectively abortion until birth should be in no way regulated, I find that to be morally indefensible.
My understanding right now is that a majority of Democrats would not support abortion through birth. My understanding is the more popular position, I don't think any state lets you go through birth. Maybe I'm off on that. Maybe there's a couple.
California and New York, yeah.
Okay, understood. But yeah, I think the key claim is basically, I think most Democrats would want abortion within the first few weeks prior to the development of my personal moral starting point of life is that the mind is the seat of consciousness, the brain is is where your self is. If you replace your heart, you have a robo heart, you're chilling. If you replace your brain, you're a different person, you're dead. And I think that when that brain first starts to develop, that's sort of where I see the beginning of life and where the fetus gets their first moral consideration. Would you agree that abortion before that point is tolerable?
No, I don't agree with that, but again, quick question, just as far as defining the positions.
Yeah.
So would you agree that late-term abortion is indefensible?
Yeah, I would. Yeah, that's not my position. I would
Okay,
not
so,
support that.
so you actually agree with me on the prompt. Okay, so now we get into the broader abortion conversation. That's fine. I mean,
no worries.
That's totally cool.
Yeah.
So, yes, no.
Do you feel like a majority of Democrats support through like the moment before birth?
A majority of Democrats have not supported any abortion legislation on the federal level in my entire lifetime, nor do I suppose that they will. So if there were to be a consensus 15-week abortion ban, for example, which is about the status in Europe, I would assume that virtually all Democrats would vote against that 15-week abortion ban. So while I may agree with your more moderate position, or at least use that as a starting point, that is certainly not where the Democratic Party historically has been, nor is it where the Democratic Party is right now.
Awesome, understood. And just to understand where you begin your moral consideration for a fetus.
Where I consider it?
Yeah.
At conception. Right, so I believe in life, that life begins at conception. You now have a human being with potential, not a potential human being. And then the question is exactly what the moral value of that human being is. Once you acknowledge that there is, in fact, a countervailing interest to, for example, a woman's quote-unquote right to choose, once you acknowledge there's an independent interest.
Thank you so much for your time.
You made it. You're good. You can relax.
Hi, how are you?
Doing well. How are you?
Hello. Nice to meet you. Oh wow, you look better in person. Okay, so.
That's very sweet of you. I don't often get that, so thank you.
Okay, it's fine. But yeah, how do you define abortion really quickly?
Abortion would be the forcible termination of an unborn human life.
Yes, but like, why do you hold that definition? Like, would you not assume like something like a C-section would be considered an abortion?
No, because the baby is born alive. So how would that be an abortion?
What does the definition of abortion have to include the death of a fetus?
Because that's literally the definition of abortion.
It literally isn't though. Where are you getting this definition from?
Where are you getting your definition from?
Let's go to do you like in like Mayo Clinic, like any fucking like hospital you've ever gone to before?
A C-section ends with the birth of the child.
Right, but
I know,
but abortion,
but
abortion generally. Yeah, I understand this.
I'm here. I'm talking to you.
I know, baby.
Thus I was not aborted.
I understand this, but like yes, but like no. Well, yes, but like no. But no. You could simply say that abortion is simply the ending of a pregnancy, right? So the ending of a pregnancy outside of the natural birth of a fetus. So I don't see that. I don't see why you would say that like it would have to end in the death of a fetus, which is why I'm pro-abortion on 9 months, right? Because say if a woman is not able to pass a fetus in the natural way, we can have these other abortion processes that would say like, okay, like she needs some type of induction that doesn't include the actual natural expulsion of a fetus. But it doesn't always end in the death of a fetus. So I don't see how you could say that Kamala Harris's stance is immoral in this sense.
I just don't understand how you're removing the death of the fetus from the equation about abortion. That's literally the entire moral issue. You and I would not even be arguing if we were talking about C-sections or about natural birth.
But it seems like at this core, though, we disagree on what the inherent definition of abortion is.
You could leave away. We could very easily solve this. Let's just not talk about the word abortion. Let's talk about the forcible termination of a baby.
Okay. So then, what do you value in the fetus then?
The life of the fetus.
Okay. So then, when is this? You said it begins at conception.
Yes.
And why is that?
Because that is literally the biological definition of when an independent life begins.
Yes, but like, why does it have moral value?
It has moral value because that's literally the biological definition of when a human life begins.
Right, but like, why does that have moral value though?
Okay, why does any life have moral value?
I would value sentience.
But why?
Right, because
based on what?
This is simply what we value, like you and I value. Like, is it okay to like unplug like a brain dead patient, for example?
I mean, the question is whether it's okay to unplug a brain dead patient. Actually, quite a controversial one in sort of religious circles. But as far as why, I'm just wondering if somebody's in a coma and you know they're going to wake up, Do you have the right to unplug them?
Well, coma's not brain death though. We know that there's future sentience there. Like it would be like a matter of like a conjunct of like past, future, like I'm sorry, past, present, or future sentience. But like a person in a coma has.
I agree, and guess what? Fetuses also have guaranteed future sentience.
Well, no, because you're only valuing one half of the conjunct. That's not right. So it would be past, present, or
now
future.
You're changing the topic. I mean, we started with what's the value of the fetus.
Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot. Whoa! You know what? Just for, honestly, God, just for that, I forfeit. That's like some serious efforting right there. Well done. Really well done.
Yeah, so on the topic of abortion, I think we have a big focus on the moral aspects of abortion, but I do think we should talk about the legal aspects of life, because when a baby is born, two things happen: birth certificate, social security card. When there are fetus, when it's like cells in the body, you don't get the birth certificate, you don't get a social security card because it's not alive, it's not born yet. Therefore, when it comes to like the moral repercussions of having abortion, I feel like that's very different than legally, because if a cluster of cells in a woman was equivalent to a baby, I should be able to have tax deductions on that kid. I should be able to have child care from the government. I should be able to have child support from the father. But since like the clusters of cells is in fact not a baby, I feel like morally you can say whatever, but legally a clusters of cells is not like
so sort of hiding behind the legal positivist position, I think, to shield against the morality here is a problem, and I'll tell you why. Okay. So when it comes to, first of all, don't threaten me with a good time. I'm perfectly happy to have people pay paternity for children that are currently in utero. Like that's fine with me. In fact, I think that'd be quite good. I think it would incentivize fathers to stay with the mothers and actually be more responsible. But if we're talking about legal status, there are plenty of people in the United States, for example, who don't have legal status right now, who don't have a social security card, for example, in the United States. Obviously, we can't kill them. They're legal immigrants. We shouldn't murder them. There are lots of people in the legal status does not, in fact, equate to moral status in any sense of the term. I mean, it's true, for example, that children can't vote and don't actually have control over any of their decision making. Right? I have kids of my own, and I control their decision making because they're very small. Okay, that doesn't mean that I get to kill them. So the idea of legal status, thus being the basis of a moral status, is pretty hard to say. The truth is that it's because things have a moral status that we give them a legal status, and obviously considered state by state, right? For example, even in the state of California, they had something called Lacey's Law for a while. I think it's still applicable, where if somebody killed a pregnant woman, that could be treated as a double homicide in criminal law. Okay, that sort of stuff applies all over the United States. So using the legal as a substitute to sort of evade the moral question ignores the fact that people make law in the states based on what their moral perception of the issue is. The law follows the moral perception, not the other way around.
Yes, I agree, but I think there is a problem with the moral perception, especially when you consider that morality varies all across America. It's not uniform anywhere. And that's a big problem, especially when you see in the South when they're having like 6-week abortion bans, which is detrimental to women's health. Because as we see in Georgia right now, there were 2 women who were pregnant who went to a hospital, get health care, and they were denied that care because there was confusion surrounding abortion laws. That's why I focus more so on the legality aspect of it, because that's something that's uniform, that's something that could be known.
It isn't uniform though, right? I mean, it does vary state to state. I mean, as you yourself just acknowledged.
True, yes.
So, when it comes to sort of we can get into the specifics of those particular Georgia cases. One of them particularly has been relatively badly covered. A woman who took basically both doses of the abortion medication. She took it without the supervision of a doctor. She then experienced essentially sepsis, and she went to the hospital late, and then under no interpretation, by this point, she had twins. Both of the fetuses were unfortunately died by this point, so there actually was no legal problem with performing a DNC at that time, and the hospital misinterpreted the law. But without getting into more details about that particular case, the real question when it comes to abortion was, and always will be, how we weigh 2 separate considerations. One is the moral value of the life of the fetus, and the second is the woman's right to choose. The problem is that these are sort of mutually exclusive, meaning that I don't have a right to choose about your life, right? About whether I get to kill you or not, or about the children that I have that are already born. And so the right to choose is obviated by the acknowledgement of a moral status on the part of the child, and vice versa, right? If you're willing to say that the child has no moral status, whatever, then there really is no problem with abortion. The big moral problem I have with sort of Kamala Harris' position and the position that I have.
I got the judges over here.
All right.
Hey, nice to meet you, man.
I'll see you again later, dude. All right. Yeah.
Nice to meet you. Hey, Cam.
Go in.
Hey, appreciate you being here and having an open discussion.
Yeah, you bet. It's fun.
Let's say that just hypothetically, right? Baby's born. Baby, mama can't feed the baby. She's not breastfeeding. Baby dies. Morally, Do you feel like that would be better than if the baby would have just been like aborted before?
I haven't got all day.
I mean, I'm not sure that there's any. I mean, I think that it's significantly worse to purposefully kill a child rather than accidentally or through circumstances kill a child.
Not accidentally, right? She cannot.
She didn't purposefully kill the child.
She can't afford it, right?
I mean,
she can't afford to have the baby, and so you're saying that Kamala Harris is extreme, but your stance is that women are being forced to have children, even if they decide that for whatever reason. I don't care.
Why
I don't care.
Why
but
don't
for
you
whatever
care? Why
reason.
don't you care? Because you give me a very
Because it's not
specific
between
example.
me. Because it's not. It is not between me.
Right, but
it is between that
Trust
mom,
no
her
one.
health, her relationship with whoever she believes in. It is not
So
on me.
here's sort of the problem.
Mhm.
You're extrapolating from a very emotionally laden example
Sure.
to everything. And I'm wondering how you're doing that. So you give me a case in which you have a woman who, for whatever reason, literally cannot feed her child. For some reason, adoption's not available. There are no food stamps. There's literally nothing. She's in a desert by herself, and the baby's going to die. Is that abortion equivalent to a woman who decides to, because she doesn't want the baby for economic reasons or because it's going to crimp her lifestyle, whatever, you said you don't care about the reason at all. That's your words, not mine. So she's 15 weeks pregnant. She wants to kill it. That's the same. Why?
You're asking me why it's the same. I'm asking you why isn't it the same? Why is a baby
Think for yourself. That's not the same.
can't be born? Say that if she doesn't want that, if she says that I can't economically afford this child, that's like somebody going and saying I can't economically afford this car, and the car salesperson still taking them on a test drive. Like, what's the point if they've already told you that they are not going to be able to economically afford it unless
So I think
you give them, like you said, okay, what about abortion? Well, there's how many people in foster care that aren't being adopted right now today? All right,
Should we kill them or what?
I'm not saying we should kill them. I'm just saying that should we wait at least until
Would it have been better if they were dead?
those people? You tell me.
No, you tell me. You're the one who's
If
suggesting
those
this
people-
that's a matter of moral apathy, whether those kids were born or not. I don't think so.
So if kids are in foster care and not being treated well, they're being abused. They're not being fed.
That is a
they're being
horrific problem, yes.
they're being locked. The fridge is being locked, and they're told they can't go get it because there are people who are only in it because they're getting a check. You're saying that is morally
superior to killing them? Yes.
to before they're born. So
Yes.
you're saying that torturing a human being who's born like they're a real life
No, I'm
human
not the one in
today.
favor of torture. You're the one in favor of unborn people
If
being
you
killed.
can't, if the only way to survive is food and water, and you rely on someone else to provide that to you, and they're not providing it to you, what would you call that?
I'm confused by.
I know you are
no,
because your
but I
argument
really-
contradicts itself.
No, it really, really doesn't. I mean, the argument that you're making is that a born child deprived of food and water never should have been born.
No.
I don't see why that follows.
That's not my argument. My argument.
Wow. Okay, we're gonna take this chair. Look at that.
Hey, Ben.
Like a bro, my friend. All right.
How's it going?
Let's break open
So, first
beer or
question:
something.
can men get pregnant?
Men cannot get pregnant.